My father left me a voicemail on December 30th that made my blood run cold. He said, "If you ruin New Year's Eve by showing up, I will make sure you never see a dime of your mother's inheritance." For 10 years, my stepmother and half-brother had convinced him I was a liar, a thief, and a disgraced daughter. I was banned from the annual family gala, the biggest event of the year. So, I stayed home. But at 11:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the clock struck midnight, there was a sharp knock at my front door. I opened it to find two uniformed officers, a city marshal, and a courier holding a sealed manila envelope stamped urgent estate audit. The officer looked at me and said, "Miss Hayes, your father didn't call the police on you. Your mother's estate attorney did on him." My name is Sienna, and at 32 years old, I thought I was completely immune to the cruelty of my own family. But sitting on my living room sofa on December 30th, listening to a 20-second voicemail on repeat, I realized how wrong I was. The voice belonged to my father, Richard Hayes. Cold, callous, void of any affection. "If you ruin New Year's Eve by showing up tomorrow, Sienna, I will make sure you never see a single dime of your mother's inheritance. Stay away from the mansion." For 10 long years, ever since my mother passed, my stepmother Evelyn and her son Julian had carried out a systematic campaign to destroy me. They fed my father a steady diet of lies, painting me as a dishonest, greedy daughter who only cared about his money. Slowly, they eroded every ounce of trust he had in me, replacing his love with suspicion. The annual New Year's Eve gala was the crown jewel of the Hayes estate, a lavish event for the city's elite. And this year, my father made it crystal clear. I was officially an outcast, forbidden from setting foot on the property, while my mother's memory was traded away for political favors. By 11 p.m. on New Year's Eve, the stillness in my small apartment was almost deafening. 5 miles away, my father's gated estate was glowing with crystal chandeliers, overflowing champagne, and a room full of powerful people cheering for a family that was completely hollow on the inside. I sat near the window with a lukewarm mug of tea, wrapped in an old cardigan. It was funny how 10 years of relentless framing could shrink your entire life down to quiet isolation. Whenever missing family jewelry mysteriously turned up in my old bedroom, or whenever a fake financial scandal conveniently pointed back to me, my stepbrother Julian was always there with a sad, sympathetic look, whispering poison into my father's ear. I wasn't even angry anymore, just deeply exhausted. I had spent a decade mourning a father who is still alive, watching him willingly choose gold-plated lies over his own daughter. I thought I had finally accepted my quiet defeat. I had no idea that the real truth was already on its way to my door. At 11:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the countdown, a sharp, authoritative knock shattered the heavy silence of my apartment. I froze. Who could possibly be knocking on my door this late on New Year's Eve? When I pulled open the door, I found two tall, uniformed city police officers standing under the flickering hallway light. Between them was a stern man in a dark suit holding a heavy leather briefcase, and beside him stood an official city marshal carrying a thick, sealed manila envelope. The front was stamped in bold red ink, "Urgent estate audit and court summons." "Miss Sienna Hayes?" the marshal asked, his voice crisp and strictly professional. "Yes," I replied, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Is everything okay? Has something happened to my father?" The man in the suit stepped forward, pulling a gold-embossed credential from his coat pocket. "Miss Hayes, my name is Arthur Pendleton. I am the senior partner overseeing your late mother's original trust foundation. Your father didn't call the police on you tonight. Your mother's estate attorney triggered an emergency court injunction against him. He handed me the sealed envelope. Your father is attempting to liquidate your mother's entire fortune at midnight. We need you with us." The sleek black sedan pulled up to the grand gates of the Hayes mansion at precisely 11:53 p.m. Valets stood in shock as two city police cruisers, their lights flashing silently, followed us right up the winding driveway. I stepped out into the crisp winter air, flanked by Officer Vance, the city marshal, and Mr. Pendleton. Walking through those double mahogany doors felt like stepping back onto a battleground I thought I'd abandoned forever. The grand ballroom was breathtaking, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over dozens of guests in tuxedos and evening gowns, holding crystal flutes of champagne. At the far end of the room stood my father, Richard, raise his glass alongside Evelyn and Julian. The moment my father spotted me, the warmth drained from his face, replaced by pure, blinding fury. He set his glass down so hard it nearly shattered, striding toward me with heavy, aggressive steps. "How dare you?" he spat, his voice echoing over the hushed crowd. "I warned you, Sienna. Security, throw her out." Beside him, Evelyn quickly pressed a delicate hand to her chest, pretending to look terrified, while Julian smirked, clearly satisfied that I had just sealed my own financial destruction. Before my father's security team could even take a single step forward, the city marshal stepped cleanly between us, holding up a high court injunction stamped with red ink. "Richard Hayes, by order of the Superior Court, this event and all associated estate accounts are frozen immediately," the marshal announced. His voice boomed across the silent ballroom, cutting right through the soft orchestral music. Evelyn's theatrical smile shattered instantly. Beside her, Julian's cocky smirk evaporated into absolute panic. Mr. Pendleton stepped forward, unzipping his briefcase to reveal a massive stack of forensic financial reports. 15 minutes ago, your system attempted to transfer $30 million out of your late wife's trust fund, Pendleton said, looking my father dead in the eye. An automatic forensic audit was triggered, and what we uncovered wasn't a transfer to a legitimate charity. It was a payoff to offshore accounts controlled by your stepson, Julian. Gasps rippled through the crowd of high society guests. Pendleton turned a page, his voice unwavering. Furthermore, forensic handwriting analysis confirms that Julian forged Sienna's signature on the loan applications 3 years ago, framing her for bank fraud while he pocketed the cash. And Evelyn was receiving kickbacks from every single transaction. My father stood frozen, his face draining of color as he stared at his wife and stepson in horror. As the grandfather clock in the foyer began its slow, heavy strikes toward midnight, the 2 police officers stepped past my father and placed their hands directly on Julian's shoulders. "Julian Vance, you are under arrest for grand larceny, wire fraud, and systematic forgery," Officer Vance announced, snapping a pair of heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists. Julian panicked, thrashing uselessly. "Mom, do something. Dad, tell them it's a mistake." Evelyn backed away, her hands trembling, but the city marshal handed her a second legal summons for criminal conspiracy. The high society guests pulled out their phones, whispers and gasp filling the room as the golden facade of the Hayes family shattered completely. My father staggered backward, collapsing into a nearby velvet chair. The man who had spent 10 years treating me like a disgraced outcast looked up at me, his eyes wide with profound horror and grief. "Sienna?" He choked out, his voice cracking as tears filled his eyes. "What have I done? I ruined everything, please forgive me." I looked down at him, feeling no anger, only a deep, quiet clarity. "You didn't ruin everything, Dad. They did. But from this midnight on, you no longer control my mother's legacy. I do." In the weeks that followed that explosive New Year's Eve, the dust finally settled, revealing the true cost of 10 years of deception. Julian entered a guilty plea to grand larceny and wire fraud, facing up to 8 years in state prison. Evelyn, stripped of her access to the family accounts and facing hefty civil penalties, quietly signed divorce papers and left the state in utter disgrace. My father tried endlessly to make amends, sending letters, leaving tearful voicemails, and offering to hand over his entire personal estate. But while I chose to forgive him for my own peace of mind, I knew that trust, once completely shattered, cannot be rebuilt overnight. I set firm boundaries, stepping into my full authority as the sole head of my mother's foundation. Now, sitting in my new office, looking out over the city skyline, I realized that the knock on my door that night didn't just save my inheritance, it restored my truth. I stepped out of the shadows of their lies and finally reclaimed my life.